Hey, everybody. Here's this Agile thing. My name's Matt Beam. We're live now. We are live streaming to YouTube, and probably that's it. It's Saturday morning, 10 a.m. I said my name's Matt Beam.
And I'm Mike Markey.
And I'm Jeff Singleton.
Jeff is still a little bit low energy. Jeff, we're going to need you to crank it up if you could. That would be.
Yeah, you're at about a 2. We're going to need you at at least a 5.
I'm at an 8, heading for a 13. So
I'm normally at a 1. So I did
we know we like animating you in some form or fashion by the end of this.
Saturday morning is for animations, if you remember. I think we agree on that. Like the way that I think of that or understand it is that people with Agile in their title for a while have been not making an explicit enough connection between the Agile values and principles and practices and organizational outcomes. That seems to be the thesis that a lot of people are sort of centering on, is that if you're a principal at one of these organizations, if you're an executive and you're buying or hiring Agile stuff, it wasn't clear to you what the return on that investment was, because we weren't explicitly tying it in a lot of cases to return on investment, making more revenue, cutting more costs, decreasing risks. And so that's why, let me just finish this. So the theory of constraints specifically talks about this gap, right? They talk about what's preventing you from reaching your goal as an organization and how to understand that stuff and to figure out what's holding you back, the constraint they'd call it, and how to manage that and make the overall organization more effective. And so that's what's led me down this path of how does Eli Goldratt think about the goal? Is it just money? Is it more expansive than that? And how do you understand all of the goals, the sub-goals in an organization? How do you understand those and find conflicts and resolve those? And so this week I was thinking we'd talk about, he's got a bunch of thinking process tools. He's got a lot of thought technology around how to do this stuff. A bunch of trees, which is why that's our... I think honestly, it's such a poetic image, right? Because the original story of the theory of constraints, the thing that illustrates the theory of constraints, is a bunch of guys walking in the woods. So when we talk about Boy Scouts, yeah, Herbie is the slowest one, and they figure out how to manage a constraint in the form of Herbie. It's a metaphor for this whole thing. And when we said we wanted to talk about trees, different types of thinking process tools in the metaphor of trees. It generated a picture of a bunch of guys walking in the woods. I thought that was awesome.
Finding clarity, seeing the forest for the trees and the path through the forest and all this other. The metaphor just writes itself.
It sure did.
All right, we are lost in the forest.
Yes,
so
indeed.
How do we align our path through this dark place?
What we told people we would talk about were the trees, the
reality trees and weird things like that.
Well, there's different types of them. So the theory of constraints has these things called thinking process tools. What's that guy's name? The guy who did Back to Work? He would call these the thought technologies. The guy from 43 Folders. Y'all don't know that? Okay. So there are different... and you can read these in Goldratt's books, but there's current reality tree, there's the evaporating cloud, there's the future reality tree, there's a prerequisite tree, there's the transition tree, there's a strategy and tactics tree, there's a negative branch reservation tree. Bunch of trees in the forest, metaphorically speaking. Don't mix those metaphors. That was unintentional.
It sounds like there's an implied order just to the words you use, that you did not express them in that implied order.
Yeah.
Is it like, so how, we've got a lot of trees. These trees represent thought processes or tools that we could put into play. How would they propose using this? Say we think we have a goal out there in the future that we're trying to get to. So there's all these trees around us. How do we use the trees to align ourselves toward that goal?
Yeah. So if you're just now presented with the problem, what you might want to do first is understand the system's main problems and uncover the root causes.
Okay.
So that you might want to use a current reality tree for that. So it's basically a cause and effect diagram.
The current reality tree. See, now when we do assessments of organizations, we often will take a reading of where things are. We'll call that a baseline reading. And then we'll have a conversation about where they want to go, and we'll call that the future state. And then on the journey, future reality tree, right? So on the journey between your baseline and your future, there's where you are now, the we are here on the map, and that's the current reality tree. Okay. Okay, metaphorically sound. Carry on. What else?
So, let's say you get there, you have an organization with problems, you map out the problems in terms, you capture them and express them in terms of the undesirable effects that you're seeing.
The UDs.
The UDEs.
UDEs. Because there's DEs.
The desirable effects is what you want to get to.
That's what you're trying to get to, DEs, and you're trying to avoid UDEs or minimize
You're trying to convert
UDEs?
your UDs to Ds. That's right.
Okay.
So what's going on now is in the current reality tree. And then you might say, okay, so where do we want to get to? And you would create a different diagram called a future reality tree, which would visualize the proposed solution's impact on the organization's future states and ensure new problems are not introduced.
Okay. We've done this with story mapping too. Like
No.
when you do story mapping, there's a future state. There's what's your current reality. Then there's also a future reality too.
I think they're related, but they're distinct. Is what I don't mean to be contentious, but I do think they're distinct. I mean,
they would have to be distinct. You couldn't.
Yeah.
You can't totally overlay one on top of the other one, because one is what is, and the other is what one would want.
What's that Led Zeppelin song? What is and
as
shall never be?
It's as is and to be.
That's the question.
All right. I'm sorry.
This is good. This is the banter
I
that
disrailed
people-
you again.
So the future reality describes where we're going. And so there's a bunch of other kind of trees. To get from the current reality tree to get to the future reality tree, you might want to create a prerequisite tree, which is help you to determine in what sequence the necessary changes or steps must be taken to achieve the desired future state. Again, it's a structured list it's helping you think clearly. So it's externalizing all these assumptions and histories and cultural effects and blah, blah, blah in people's heads, creating an artifact and saying, is this right, or am I crazy, or what's wrong with it? So it's definitely a living diagram.
Okay. Go on.
You might have people who disagree.
If I made any comment, all I would do is question the word prerequisite tree.
Well, that's what we're
seems
here
like
for.
It's too late. We've already know the prerequisite. All you're doing is you're already taking the path from point A to point B. Now we're plotting the path out by coming up with what the steps are. It sounds like the prerequisite tree is what those steps are.
Visualize. Determine what
Maybe?
sequence. No, we haven't taken those yet. It's a planning tool.
It's prioritization. It's sequencing.
And it's
Say
understanding.
it's probably
Okay.
more like a sequencing tree. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
You go down this path, you'll end up in the river, kind of a thing.
Better. Go on.
Yeah. So people might disagree.
No, they won't.
So you know what we need right now? Right
What?
now we need an evaporating cloud.
See, now that's not a tree. What's
Yes, it is.
how?
Stick this on the tree. It's
Okay.
the purpose is to resolve systemic conflicts and remove assumptions that block improvement. So
Which
you have
means?
so let's say, for example, departments might argue we must reduce raw material costs, right? Purchasing might say, hey, we need to reduce costs. And production department might say we do ensure the continuous supply of raw materials, for example. So they're in conflict, right?
Departments
And so by
might
mapping that
argue
out-
we must reduce costs, and you go and you smack them with the throughput accounting stick. Like, no, bad.
I would mark that on the prerequisite tree and see how that would go. Exactly. So it's
All right.
basically to identify where people disagree or where there's conflicting goals. Again, there's a hierarchy of goals, and we want to make sure that we resolve them in a way that supports the ultimate goal, whatever goal units we're using to keep score.
Evaporating cloud.
So it's
Evaporating
about
the
alignment.
conflict.
It's about the goal, in that case, of using that evaporating cloud then is to gain alignment across the system or across the organization.
Because what we see in so many... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
And it really uses the examination of assumptions, because we all function under certain assumptions, and they may or may not be valid assumptions. And so really it seeks to expose those assumptions as what they are, assumptions, as we've said many times before. You may think, yeah, this is gospel, and in fact it's merely an assumption, and you really do need to examine it a lot closer. So that's really essentially what the objective is of using that evaporating cloud.
Yes, and those assumptions might be totally valid within my department. So there's no reason for me to question it if I'm not looking outside my context. But when you roll them up, it turns out that my assumptions and my goals are in conflict with some other department, which means the organization as a whole is paying a disalignment tax.
Now, if anyone would like a better, or not, a more immediate illustration of an evaporating cloud, you have to look no further than this very show, because we had a conflict over the statement of the goal.
Yes.
And we evaporated the problem by saying, let's just refer to it as value or goal units, and then let's move on, so that we can start looking at the real problem or the real meat of this and not get hung up on the terminology of this thing. What do you think of that?
I think it's fair.
Evaporated that cloud. I disagree. Tough.
So are there any other clouds? We talked about all of future reality.
We didn't talk about a transition tree.
Yeah. Well, I mean, can you guess what that might be?
No.
I'm guessing it would be a step-by-step implementation plan. So this takes you from the current state to the future state. This corresponds.
So those are the steps. That's the steps. Like, so you prioritized what you wanted to do. Now these are the steps that get you along that path.
Yeah, and so this obviously overlaps significantly with organizational change management, which is where Agile people might want to go.
And we do this with a change backlog or a change log when we're coaching, like when we're taking folks from that point A to point B.
Yeah.
So
it might help you quantify the value of the change.
When they call these things trees,
yeah,
is there a visualization that makes them look like a tree in some way?
Yes.
Like, okay.
Because you start with the main goal at the top, and then you branch out. So if your goal is to whatever your goal is, like what do you need to do to reach that goal? And so then there's subcomponents of the subordinate goals, is I think what they would call them. And then you just branch out to all the different departments. Like eventually you want to map out all of the people working in the organization, because you should be able to go to anybody on any team on any day and understand how what they're doing rolls up to, contributes to the organization reaching the goal. If you can't make that connection, you might ask, what would you say you do here, Bob?
Oh, might you? Okay.
When they rolled into Twitter after Elon bought it, they were they were providing lunch for everybody who worked there, but the unit cost of the lunch was like $800 because it was the pandemic. Like they'd started making lunch for a bunch of people, and then the pandemic hit, and nobody was coming into the office, and so they never went back and changed how much food they were making. So they were making enormous amounts of food for breakfast and throwing it out.
Is this
they never
how
went
he
back.
learned what inefficiency is?
It's just a side little vignette that I heard recently.
That's a weird vignette.
Yeah, it is.
I just watched.
It's weird.
I'm obsessed with watching videos of cyber trucks exploding, or breaking, or falling apart, or failing to be basic, useful trucks.
Why would you say you're obsessed with that?
I don't know, because I watched one, and then and then my feed gave me 2, and I watched them both, and now my feed gave me 6, and now I have no choice but to be obsessed because the algorithm, in fact, his own damn algorithm keeps feeding me more of his own mistakes. So anyway, strategy and tactics tree.
Mike seems upset.
If we talked about if we talked about a transition tree being tactical things you're doing, strategy and tactics sounds like a different thing. So what?
It's probably a higher level tool used to communicate an entire strategy.
Yeah, a rationale maybe? Yeah.
And the tactical actions needed. Yeah, across the organization.
See, now it just seems a little backwards. Like, shouldn't you know your strategy before you start figuring out how you... This feels more like you're backing into it. Like, oh, here's everything we're going to do. Now let's justify it.
Well, what order do you think we would do it?
I was just going to say, I don't think that the way Matt listed them and is necessarily the order in which you should automatically interpret. I think maybe there's an implied assumption that, okay, so we go through it like that, but I don't know that I would look at it that way. In fact, I look at these as all a bunch of tools in the toolbox, and which one logically, so I'm trying to change out a faucet. What's the first thing that I'm going to need? I don't need the hammer yet. I may not need the hammer at all.
Hopefully you never need the hammer.
Well, I don't know. I talked to a guy at was it Dell? No, it was Compaq before it was Dell. And his solution for helping me to unfreeze a hard drive was, do you have a hammer?
Yes, that is a valid last ditch effort with a hard drive.
Exactly, and it was counterintuitive to me, but in fact, it works.
Yes.
Anyway,
but once it works, get everything you can off that drive because it's not going to work for long.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Anyway, the whole point is, you could make an assumption that the way you listed them, and I don't know if you listed them in accordance to what they are in the book, but even then, even if they were listed that way, we have to be careful taking things at face value. Just because an author lists a bunch of tools and this is the order you should use them, well, okay, that's one recommendation. Maybe that's your preference, but if I can find a better way to utilize the tools in a different order, then isn't that just as valid?
Yes, in these discussions, I think we should be careful to stipulate, how would you say it? The map is not the territory.
I was going to use that quote earlier. I am happy to stipulate that.
This is an abstract representation of stuff that you might navigate, but it doesn't mean it's the best order, and you should keep in mind the difference between the representation and your reality on the ground. Totally agreed.
Your mileage may vary.
Your mileage is definitely going to vary. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So that was a strategy. And then negative branch reservation.
Yeah. This is a preventative tool. You might use it to anticipate and mitigate unintended negative consequences of a proposed change.
Risks?
So, like...
Risks.
I once did a retro with a team once, and the theme of the retro, this was at a healthcare company in 2019, it was, okay, here's what I want you to think about. We went through this next sprint, and it was terrible. We totally failed. What went wrong?
Spontaneous vehicle disassembly.
Yes, totally. Yeah, this is other places call this a pre-mortem, right? I don't know. It's not exactly the same thing, but this is another way of systemically thinking through what went wrong before it happens. What could have gone wrong, and why did it have gone wrong?
Does the pre-mortem happen right before you hit the wall, or when you start the journey, as you start imagining all the things that might go wrong on the journey?
Yeah, I would shift left as far as you can on that one. Yeah, for sure.
We've been going along at 100 miles an hour. There's a wall right in front of us. All right, let's stop. Let's talk
Yeah.
about what our risks are at this point.
Yes.
We're not
Totally.
dead yet. There's
It is
still a
not the way to
chance.
do it.
There's still a chance we could turn the wheel.
What
pull
can we
back
do
on the
differently
stick.
in the next 3 seconds to avoid the wall? Not helpful.
Right before we hit the wall, jump up.
No, you
So that's all the
evaporate
trees. Congratulations, gentlemen. We have gone through the four. Now, if you could stipulate an order to Jeff's point, like this is not necessarily the way you should do it, but you could stipulate an order, an outline, if you have a problem like this, where you say just super high level, step one, communicate the overarching goal, whatever that is, and stipulate your goal units. 2, assess the current reality. 3,
Okay, so
identify core
overarching goal,
conflicts.
that's strategy and
Well, it might be to
potentially.
make more money now and in the future.
well,
But
but
it
it's
depends.
still, it can be, you're establishing the goal, so you're figuring out what,
What everybody's going to measure their
Yeah.
process against.
then figure out your current reality.
Yes.
That
Identify
makes
the
sense.
core conflicts and evaporate them.
Cool.
Then
Phaser set on kill.
Yes. Kill the problem. Propose and validate solutions with the future reality tree.
Okay. Well, sure, but maybe that's future reality tree and a little bit of prerequisite tree too.
Yeah.
have
Well, the planning, the prerequisite. So maybe we should back up and say, obviously, the current reality tree, assessing the current reality would be using the current reality tree as we
Yes.
go in order. Identify the core conflicts would be using the evaporating cloud, because that's what that's about.
Okay.
Then the propose and validate solutions would be using the future reality tree to say, does everybody agree
Okay.
where we're going?
Sure. Gotcha.
Planning the implementation for the organizational change management would use the prerequisite tree and the transition tree,
Okay.
right? And then establish tactics and the tactics tree and iterate and improve. So the idea behind the thinking processes, as I understand them, is to make it explicit. Guys, let me take you amongst the trees and let me show you what I think, where we are, where we're going, what are the obstacles, where do we disagree, like the assumptions that are in any organization of any size and the level of confusion and that we're not aligned but we don't know it and some of us are pissed off about it. Like there's just all of these, it's really, really complex. And so essentially what I see these as is a way to simplify all that stuff with a method.
Methodically.
Yeah. Yeah. Method has fewer letters in it, so I prefer it. I'm trying to simplify
Although this was your opportunity to coin a new word.
One of my pet peeves is when people refer to Scrum and Scrum or XP or Kanban as a methodology. Mm-hmm. Methodology means the study of methods, doesn't it? So Scrum is a method and XP is a method. If I'm comparing and contrasting Scrum and XP, that's methodology.
Would be something that it's a methodology is not the study of methods. Methodology as a thing I do is I could be a methodologist and I study methods, but I think a methodology is just one of a collection of methods. So, yeah.
Biology is a study of bio, and meteorology is a study of meteors. So wouldn't methodology be the study of method? So, method?
It would be, but the A...
Is this just a
refer
trivial
to it as-
language thing that it's fun to argue about and nobody cares?
Yes, I was
Okay.
about to say,
Okay.
DAUGHTER is pronounced daughter, but LAUGHTER is pronounced laughter.
Lauder. No, it's lauder. It's clearly lauder.
No. Lauder? No, laughter.
Let's ask the robot. Okay, so that's the total of, I think, all the stuff that I prepared for my...
Well, it's the total, that's the practical steps.
Yeah.
There's stuff that would happen as you navigate. So you've gone and you've laid out these trees.
Yeah.
Somehow you found a way to express your actions in a tree-like form.
Forest.
And theoretically, you would iterate on your plan. You wouldn't just set it up in the beginning and live with it, right?
No.
So you would, as you progress toward your future state, you would have to assess how things are going,
Yeah.
see if there's new, what did he say? Negative branch reservations that get in your way.
Undesirable outcomes, Udis?
Risks could become realized. So how do we respond to those? Do we need to adjust our path? Do we need to adjust our tactics? Is our strategy still sound?
Yeah, I would so I'd keep updating the trees, the thinking. But maybe that leads us to the next topic. Boy, this is timely. Here's our time box. Hey, time box. Maybe that leads us to the next topic in my mind, which might be the change management part of it, the organizational change management, to say, where are you now and where are you going and how do you manage that? Does that make sense or no? I don't know. I'm just thinking.
That might be a future topic. I think we have a different plan for our next topic. So our
the next
topic,
show. Yeah.
Yes. Our next topic in our next show is going to be tied to, we've been doing a lot of talk about theory. We've been talking about ways that you could run a business. What do businessmen really want? What do businesses really want to do? How do they really lay themselves out? And a lot of times these new age thought processes that we're pitching, this new way of working, falls on deaf ears. People look at it and say, well, that would never work in reality. You would never be able to practically run a company like that. I believe they're wrong, and I can prove it. We are going to have a guest. We are going to have a guest next week. We're going to have a guest who is walking the talk. We are going to have a guest who is a CEO of a successful company, and he's going to come and share his story with us and tell us what he's done and how he does things in alignment with some of these thoughts and processes we've been talking about.
I love that idea. Can you share the identity of this person or any
That person's identity is Chandresh Patel of Bacon Seed Technology. Anyway, more on that next week.
Very good. It feels like this has been an Agile thing. By the way, when are we going to change the name of the show? Do we need to talk about that on the show, or should we?
Right now, we're subtitling it. It's Here's this Agile thing, the Organizational Effectiveness Show.
It's not really an Agile thing. It's transcended the Agile thing. It's really
organizational effectiveness. Agile things are organizational effectiveness. So it's just we're transitioning. Sooner or later, we'll flip them over.
Okay, so we're in the gooey middle. We're inside the chrysalis.
We are our current reality, and our future reality are transitioning toward each other. How about that?
I love it.
And sooner or later, this conflict will evaporate.
I couldn't have said it better. Based on that, this has definitely been an Agile thing, and my name has been Matt Beam.
I am Mike Markey.
And I'm Jeff Singleton.
And we're definitely going to see you next week with Chandresh Patel. I believe I said that right.
Close enough.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
See ya.
Bye-bye.